Well, my name is Charlie. I'm going to give you a little presentation on the 300 and the 700 series knives by Buck and for Schrade and Camillus. Okay, first of all, I did all my homework at home, so I don't have to talk so much. What we're going to do is go off of the this sheet, first of all, and I've tried to come up with all the information I can on all the different little variations of the 300 series knives. Okay, we're just going to go across this and to show you how it's set up, and then you can go home and study it if you have a mind to. All right, first of all, we got the model number, and you can see that the first couple inches is Schrade knives made by Schrade. There were actually only two knives, 301 rather, and a 303. And next manufacturer, SC is Schrade contract. Look down a little bit further, it'll be CC, that's Camillus contract, and then BU is Buck. And then tang stamp is how the tang was stamped. Buck, and then slash, second line is made in, slash, there's no slashes on the tang stamp, but then USA. I think you all probably are familiar how that works. So Buck made in USA has 3 lines. The liners are brass. The spacers, now a lot of knives had spacers in them. This particular one, the first one out of the box didn't have any spacers. In fact, none of the Schrade knives had spacers. H pins are the handle pins. Actually, there might be rivets, but I call them pins just to differentiate between rivets. And I differentiate, or I call the rivet is a rivet that holds the knife together and the back spring. That's down here. That's what I call a rivet in any writing I do. And you got end pins and handle pins, which I picked one up that doesn't have it.
Is there some way on the knife you can tell the difference between a Schrade contract and a Camillus contract?
I'll get into that.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you can tell. In fact, let's do it right now. All right. Probably the easiest way to tell on a Schrade contract knife from a distance is how high the sheep's foot blade is. It always sticks out, especially in the smaller 303. Where did mine go? Oh, here it is. See how high that thing is?
Very high.
Right. Now, to confirm, you look at the bolsters, and you'll see that there's no end pin in the bolster. If you look at this handout right here, it kind of explains it for you. The Schrade bolster is fitted onto the knife or attached to the knife with a little keyhole slot, like this. And you can see that there are no pins visible. That's the second thing. Another thing, another little clue is how much more serpentine or snake-like these are than the following Camillus or Buck. So that's how to tell the difference. Any questions? Okay, great. You all know how to do it. Go to somebody displaying and see 500 different knives there. Oh, there's a Schrade right there. No, I'm just joking. Schrade only made 2 knives. They were both Stockman pattern, the larger 301 and the smaller 303. 305 was or 9? 305, the Bert Taylor?
The third one, yes, 305.
Bert Taylor claimed that there was a 305. Joe did a lot of research. Larry, who's a big collector, and I, who have done a few, have never seen any 305 made by Schrade. I don't think they exist, despite what Burns said. I think he was just going by memory. All right, to continue on here. The rivet, of course, I just explained about the rivet. It's what holds the springs together and the knife together. The pull is your nail nick. So the long pull or the French pull were the original Schrades and the very first of the Camillus knives. They're knee long, as opposed to the current crescent pull, or short pull it's called, or short shortfall. Anyway, a discussion of back springs, okay. First knives had two back springs. The two minor blades were on a one back spring, and the main blade was on another. Okay? And that's kind of industry standard until Buck came along, and Buck's not the only one that's ever done it, but current Bucks are three back springs for three blades, individual back springs. All right, bolsters, I'll tell you, attached bolsters are the ones that are chopped on, that's what it's called. Attached bolsters or integrated bolsters, where the current knives that are made by Buck are sintered. Either familiar with the process, sintering, they take powdered metal or powdered metal, right? Put it under pressure and heat and fuse it all together to make what they want. In other words, it's just shaped or pressed out. It's not poured molten or anything like that. So that's two kind of bolsters, attached and integrated, integral. All right, dates, as near as I can come up with, I came up with the dates I think these things were made. Pretty sure on the charades, but some of the dates may be, you know, if you went to court, and I wouldn't go to bat yet. I say, I don't know anything about that. And then I tried to come up with identifying characteristics, which were on the first one, groove bolsters, the big thing. And there's no model number in the tank stamp at all. Subsequent knives have model numbers on the back. Like the second version of the charade had a model number in the tank stamp. Third version had the minor blades were also stamped, not with a full stamp, but just Buck. Okay. And those are the only knives that I can think of that Buck's ever made that has the secondary blade stamped. And so they tried to have charade change. Charade is a whole lot bigger than Buck. Buck was tiny at the time. So Buck said, yeah, well, we'll go to Camilla, who makes their knives that way to begin with anyway, with the end pin. All you got to do to change the blade into a knife with an end pin is knock the end pin out, put a new blade in, make sure it works right, and send it back to the customer. So that's the reason for the change. Okay, any questions on this thing? Like I say, if you're interested in it, you take it home and you can do a little delving into it and research a little bit.
Did you print all that yourself?
Yes. Well, I took drafting in school. Okay, we're going to look at the, if I can find mine, where it is. We'll look at the, this next. Everybody get one of these? There it is. Okay, what I've tried to do here is, well, the first one's not too interesting. In fact, I made a mistake. I wanted to name the pattern. What I did is name, instead of calling it, well, the first one is a stockman, but it's a premium stockman. Next one I call it the Buck's name for it, Cadet, which is a junior premium stockman. So I made a mistake in my own thing here. So this is pretty much self-explanatory. Turn the page and it's kind of a chronology. Charade contract, which was their first. The 301s, the first ones were received in late '66. And they appeared in the '67 catalog. Okay. And I'm sure you all know that pictures in the catalog don't necessarily indicate what's being made at that particular time. Sometimes the charade knives stayed in the catalog until sometime in the '70s, after their contract was complete. Not the groove bolster one, but one of the second ones. Can't tell which. All right, I tried to identify how the tank stamp reads Buck made in USA. Ultimately, supplied the three variations. The first variation was groove bolsters, no tank stamp, or no model number in the tank stamp. The second variation was model number in the tank stamp on the reverse side, and the third, is that right? I've forgotten. Model number is in the tank stamp, but I can't remember where it is.
Backside.
Okay, it's on the pile side. This must be buck, all buck. Oh, and then the third variation was all blades are marked buck. I sound lying to myself here. Buck made in USA. Oh.
Did you find one?
Yeah, the Buck made in USA, 3 lines, no model number anyplace. But it's not the groove bolster.
Right.
Well, that slipped my memory. I didn't know that one existed. Anyway, there it is. And the next one has, let me look. It has the model number in the tank stamp, and all blades are marked.
No, it's Buck made.
Yeah,
Buck
okay.
Made in USA.
Buck made in USA, and then
And all blades marked.
and the small blades are marked Buck.
Charlie, they didn't start putting the
Model number
model
in
number
till the
on
reverse
the
side.
back side of the tank
Well,
until late '71 probably.
my memory's not all that good. As you get to know me, Larry, you'll find that out. Anyway, if you do your research, you'll find this out, right? Okay, and then I just went on down the line with the 303. Then I got into Camillus. You'll notice that in a period from 72 to the last Schrade knives received, but they'd already started receiving Camillus knives as early as early 1971. So there's a period of time where they were having two manufacturers here. And then in about 1984 or 5, which?
One or the other.
Okay, Buck started making their own knives. And they made them the traditional way with the chopped on bolsters and the brass binders and all that stuff. And finally as the bean counters got in and said, okay, we can make these cheaper and better, and the engineer says, okay, let's make them better, but we'll also make them cheaper, you know, that kind of thing. And that's the reason Buck's still in business, is because they've done that. Schrade and Camillus are no longer in business after 100 years.
'84, when Buck started making the knives themselves, they only made the 301, 303, 305, and 309.
Right.
And I know you know this, Charlie, that some of the models they kept selling that Camillus was still making on contract.
Oh, yeah.
But not those knives. And that's
Right.
something that a lot of people don't know.
Okay, yeah, I never did bring that out. That's true. Buck eventually got a whole line of Camillus knives, up to every odd number, up to 321. So how many is that? 11 knives, 10 knives, 11 knives. Yeah. One's repeated twice, 3 times. But anyway. But the first 4, the 30, 301, 303, the 305, and I don't know why they did this, but they skipped the 309. I think because they had Camillus come up with the 307 first, and then they went into the 309. And then when they dropped, they didn't want to, when they did their own, they didn't want to redo or do the 307, the big one. They skipped that and just held on to the, so there's a jump of 305 to 309. There's no 307 that cost as many. Have I clouded the water for you? I don't see any really confused faces back there, so, okay. Anyway, the second part is just a chronology, and if you study that, you can see what's going on. And then I've just kind of done a, like prose I've written out and stuff. And I have mentioned, but I'm not really going to get into it. The other knives that Buck has made, with different colored handles. They've got red handles. They've got two versions actually of red handles. There's the smooth and the soft cut. And then they made bones. There's two versions of bone handle knives. They made now here. I didn't know, nor did anybody in my previous classes. How many of these yellow knives are Smoky Mountain Knife Works exclusive?
I think all of them were.
I think so too.
I believe they all were Smoky Mountain Special Projects.
Okay.
And Camillus made several of them.
Most
Buck made the 301, 303, 305, and 309,
Right.
and any others Camillus made.
Right, right.
Did they ever do the bird knife, anything other than just black?
What knife?
The bird knife, for some reason?
No, I've only
never
seen-
seen one other than some that were rehandled in the custom shop with stag or something.
I've never seen anything other than blacks. They didn't make that many of them to begin with.
Yeah, I bought one years ago, and all I ever found was just black, so I just never made it.
Here's a head piece now. Yeah. Okay, and proceeding on here, I've got a letter that Larry typed up his Knife World article and sent it to me, so I included that. Good information. And I've come up with some ECRs for Larry. In fact, Larry sent it to me. I just included these just to kind of give you a feel for how things work within the plant. In fact, some of the things that are changed, they'll come up with a cover sheet that say see attached. Well, when that happened, I didn't put the cover sheet on. Like with these drawings of the 315. No cover sheet. But the 315 is kind of a neat series all of its own, because they're made, I don't know, 6, 7 versions. I'll show them to you. The first thing they did, they came out with this knife, marked 3, marked Buck made in USA, 3 line. On the reverse side, or on the plow side, is the model number. Right here. Okay. The next knife is the same knife exactly, and again, this is the Camillus knife. The next knife is the same thing exactly, except the way the tank stamp reads, and it's got Buck 315 USA. Okay. So, for those of you that want to get nitpicking, that's, for me, is a great big deal, because it means different variations. Like America's Cup race, I think that Ted Turner won the race. He contacted with Buck to make some knives. Well, the original knives had American flag, and I think it had America's Cup race on the scale. But I got this from one of the employees. It used to be Fred Wilson, if you're familiar with him. Anyway, this was an overrun, but those America's Cup knives had the white micarta handles. And like I said, this is an overrun, so there's no markings on it. But it's marked the same way as the blade stamp is marked Buck 315 USA. And somebody said the last session that there was only 75 of these made, according to Leroy Reamer, who worked in the custom shop at the time. So we never could figure out whether it was 3 or 75 made total, and a portion of those had the printing on it, or what. But anyway, we'll probably never know. Next item. Okay. Next item to come out was, they call it bear head or bird's eye, because of the way the pins and the rivet is. But the pins that hold the knife together are hidden. Okay. Actually, I call them rivets. Next thing, they expose the rivet to help hold the blade scales on. Okay. And the next version is exactly like that, except it's hot stamped or branded with Buck. These are kind of hard to find. I'll pass these around. Take a look. And the last version, which was 89 or 90 in that era, Buck was putting serrated blades on everything. And so this is a partially serrated blade, but it's built exactly the same as the other one. I'll pass this one around too. I'm gonna leave this open.
That one's hot stamped too, or?
No, it's not hot stamp. I only have the one hot stamp.
The hot stamp ones are hard to find. I've looked for one for years and I've never found one. I know a guy in Kentucky that has one, and I know you have one.
You got mine from Fred Wilson.
Yeah. I don't know if they ever hit the market. I think they were salesman samples.
There was an ECR about that. They said they was going to do it, but
But they may
never
not
did
have
happen.
done it.
They didn't, but I know, except maybe a few.
That's part of the fun of the 300 series. There are a ton of variations, and they're cheap. They're inexpensive knives.
Yeah, relatively.
Relatively.
Unless you're poor like me, then it's, you know, like sending your kid to college for me to buy a knife anymore. Any questions on the 300s? At all? Come on, folks, help me out. Huh? Okay, so we'll talk about the 700s now. Gothic script on the escutcheon, on the shield, and also on the blade stand. And there was a period of time where there was a transition period after a couple of years. You'll find some with block tank stamps, script, escutcheons, and vice versa. So Buck uses up their old stuff, they don't throw it away. So again, that's why we're here, because they're it's not cheapness, it's just good business. Okay. And that's one of these things, yes. Now, I never have been able to figure out, because I've been able to find 4 knives during the transition knives, but only one of each one, and there's one that's, I can't remember which is which, but one is like, the tank stamp is one way, and the, like script, and the escutcheon is Buck, and the other 3 are just the opposite. I never have been able to find more, so maybe they don't exist, maybe they do. All right, and then the next thing they did, said he was coming out with 3 back springs. And the reason for this is, again, the bean counters got into it. When you put 2 blades in the same blade well, you either have to put spacers in and offset the grind, or bend the right blade, which is called crimping. Pinking. And so with 3 back springs, all the back springs are the same for all the blades, so they make essentially 1 back spring. They take out all the center spacers and all that other good stuff, and so it makes it a knife that's a whole lot easier to make and a whole lot fewer parts. And it's one of your handouts on the 700 has got the breakdown of how a 700 knife is made, which is essentially how all knives are made that have attached bolts to it. This, by the way, is all thanks to Larry, who's got more stuff than the law allows, actually. But you can see that it's a quite involved process. Now, the 300 knives have the centered frame halves where you get, I didn't explain that, right? Centering where you have powdered metal, they put it under pressure and heat, and they don't mold it, but they form it in molds. But the 700 series never did get into that. They were thinking about it and planning it, but it just never did happen. So all your 700 series knives are made the traditional way, except for the 3 back spring part, or the individual back spring. And then, I can't remember the year, about 85, 86 in that era, they said, we're going to make, okay, first of all, these original lines, all the parts are stainless steel bolster, stainless steel spacers and everything. They said, well, we're going to cheapen it a little bit, save a little bit of money. We're going to make them out of brass. So they came out with an ECR, said we're going to make them out of brass. And then came out another ECR and said, okay, we're going to make them out of both. So for a period of time, they made them out of brass and stainless steel. And eventually, they discontinued the brass, they discontinued the stainless steel, and they went to nickel silver. And the way you can tell a nickel silver, there's a couple of ways actually. You can see where the knives are buffed out. I'll throw this, hand this around. You can see where the back spring is, all the back spring, or not the spring, the end pin is stainless steel, which is harder than the nickel silver. So when they buffed it out, it's got a little trace for it. You can see it's not real neat. And you can tell the different nickel silver bolsters and stainless steel pins. You can tell the difference in the color between the pins and the bolsters. That's one way to tell. And of course, with the stainless steel, you can't tell because they're both stainless steel. No color variations. Okay. Questions? Come on, guys. Come on, girls. We're learning.
The very last series of the 700 series that they made, I can't remember the year, but it might have been 2001. Those knives, I think to save money, the handle inlays were not riveted; they were just glued.
Right.
And there's no handle. There's no handle pins. Or wait, there's handle pins. There's no escutcheon. That's what it was.
Right.
They took the escutcheon off to save money.
I've got something.
Yeah.
Now, are they all made in China?
They're not made anymore.
Not made anywhere.
700 series was never made anywhere except Elkhorn.
Yes, sir.
I've got the little display 700s. In one of the little cases, you see a 703 without the handle seal on it. And it's got a 704 blade in it. And I almost didn't buy it. I thought maybe I was getting taken, so I got a hold of Larry. And he said, more than likely, it's one of the last issues made. Buck's just trying to get rid of everything in the parts. So I got a hold of Joe, and he concurred with that, so it's sitting there.
Yeah, the 703 and the 704 have the same blade. The 704 is a single blade only. And the 703 is the Stockman pattern with the 3 blades. And there's a bunch of oddities in the 700 series. One of a kind type of thing. Now, sir, you've got 700s coming out your ears.
Does anybody know, on the 704, which is the single blade, why it was never Aramets?
It wasn't out yet.
Wasn't out yet.
It had not been released.
And they were out of business by the time it came out?
Well, they were not doing that project by the time it came out.
Yeah, I've kind of surmised that, so, thank you.
What was the question?
The Orem Edge
Okay.
700 series, the 704 is not included in that
Right,
because
right.
it had not been
Right.
introduced yet.
Here's a 704, single blade. Oh, and
Okay, see, this is neat.
speaking of the Orem Edge, here's throw this around.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And those Orem Edge
Okay,
knives,
this is-
they're really, really pretty.
Yeah.
Nice deep edgings. What, is that one right there?
Yeah.
It's you'll see it when it's passed around.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not familiar with it, they're a great looking knife.
And they're no longer in business?
Orem is no longer.
Yeah, they did some nice work. Some of the 110s, beautiful ones, yeah.
They make some 5-piece sets too. They're really nice.
This knife was made more to be like, the bluegrass or the Winchester with the heavier snap and the It's more executive looking, right?
You talking about the series?
Yeah.
700 series, yes. Yeah, it was supposed to be heftier knife.
Right.
And a better looking knife.
Tell them the story
upgraded.
about the first 703s, Charlie. There's trouble about that.
Well, I don't know if I.
Right, backspring.
Oh, yeah. The back spring, he showed me, and I didn't, in fact, I was unaware of that until this morning. When Buck first started making the 700 series, their back springs, they had tempered them incorrectly. And, what you said, the people had a knife stuck in a drawer someplace, and it broke, and the back springs broke in the drawer. And he's got one that the guy had that had saved both pieces, luckily. He's got it in the display down there, so if you look at his display, you can see that.
That was another knife I saw listed, and I said, well, I don't think I wanna pay money to buy that. Yet the longer I looked at it, reread Larry's article, came out in Knife World, I said, oh. So I ended up buying it. The old boy's from Dover, Delaware. So he bought the knife new and put it in his chest of drawers in his bedroom and just left it there. And the back spring actually broke, sitting in his drawer. And he kept not only the broken knife, but the piece, all these years, and it's down on the display there. And then the other little knife that's next to it, the back spring is also broke, but it stayed intact with the knife.
Spring steel's too hard.
Yeah. Well,
Well, they were under tension, and.
Yeah.
And they weren't tempered right, and so under tension, they just finally gave up.
Right.
And the crazy thing about those knives, I still remember Chuck Buck telling me about it, because he was looking at something in my display at one of the shows, and I made mention of it, and he said, you know, we marketed this knife to be stronger, heftier, better, and he said, we got him out, and the knife that was supposed to be stronger and better was falling apart in people's pockets. and he said, oh, he just shook his head. Now, of course, they made them right, and the series went on a long run. The first ones came out in 1980, and they finally discontinued them about 2002.
Right.
So they had a good long run.
Well,
I wouldn't have shown those two little broken back springs if it hadn't been for Larry's fine article in Knife World, where he interviewed Chuck, and I've got that printed there, because put them both together. The chief thing is that Buck's warranty, and their good work, good thing.
now when I go to knife shows, which I haven't been for the last 5 years, I'm afraid, I have to take something with me to let me know or remind me of what I have, and so this is kind of what I have come up with. I just, for my own edification here, I put the series down and the main thing about it, and the model number, and when it was made, and how much I paid for it. And also sometimes I put the grade it in, like unblemished or whatever. Oh, and I forgot to hand these out, but this is how I record my knives. I had these printed up, but I printed up near home. So I'm going to hand these out. Just hang around if you will.
That's your design?
Yes. All the pertinent information that I can come up with on that particular knife. And I use these with 300s, 700s. I've got different ones for the 110s.
I got a question on the 300 series.
Okay.
When Straight or Camillus, either one was making them, they were doing the complete knife, including
Yes.
the blade and the tempering,
Everything.
right?
The whole works.
Okay, was that tempering done under Buck standards at that time, or?
No, I think under Camillus.
Okay,
Like I
okay.
say, they're big knife companies.
Right.
So they knew how to,
Yeah, I didn't know how much at that point that they were.
I think Buck just got the knives in, and, I don't know if how many of you know this, when Buck first started getting knives, the 300 series knives from Camillus, they would inspect them and they would reject a bunch. And they took a bunch of them back to Phyllis and said, hey, these are no good. Phyllis said, well, you bought them. So what happens is, I think Vern Taylor suggested this, that they give them to missionaries over in Africa, someplace. Anyway, that's where a whole bunch of Camillus made buck 310s went over to the missionaries in Africa, and they use them as kind of like bribery or cash, you know, do this for me or convert or whatever, you know. Barter, exactly.
A lot of the handle materials that were used that were different, like stag and yellow and all of that, most of those were ones that were commissioned out to like, Buck did
No.
some of their own though.
Exactly, exactly. Now, the yellow ones, on the 300 series, the yellow ones, like Larry and I think they're all made by Camillus. Except the 301, 303, 305, and 309. Okay, but all the others are made by Camillus. But all the other knives that have, let me double check here. Yeah, all the other knives are made by Buck, in-house. They just use different color material.
Right.
Now the red handle ones, there's two versions of that. One is saw cut, one is smooth. There's two boom. One is a lot nicer and shinier than the other. Oh, there's a red boom. In fact, these are the first knives I started collecting. And Smoky Mountain Knife Works had the bolsters etched, not etched, but engraved. Right. I sold, that's my first dealings with you, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I ended up buying two and I sold one to Larry. I think he robbed me. That's why Larry's still in business. Let me say that. Anything else anybody like to see? Like when you quit talking? Oh, let me show you the Chinese knives. Now these Chinese knives, I was talking to CJ last night. The guy that owns the company, he really wanted to make knives for Buck. Buck's got a good reputation even in China. But why don't you just pass that around? They do a good job. Those are nice looking knives, as you'll see when it comes around. They're the blade steel, I think, comes from Germany. I think the machining also came from Germany. Not sure of that, but
I had heard that they had a goal to be number one on this knife steel, China.
China?
That they're working for it, you know. So it won't be too many years till we're gonna see some.
Well, China's got a, like Japan, China's got a big long tradition with swords and so forth, not necessarily Western style folding knives.
Whereas Japan was making some of those too.
Well, yeah, you remember when Japan first started making knives and selling on the American market, they were junk. Now they're great.
When we were on tour this morning, the gal that took us on the tour suggested that these 300 series with towns on, so they're being brought back to the States and manufactured here. They're not gonna be manufactured in China anymore.
Really?
That's what she told us.
Ooh, those are contracted for because of the price point.
Right.
I don't know if they're gonna be able to match that.
Well,
They have a new machine down there.
Yeah.
He said it's going to allow it.
Automated machinery may just allow them to meet that price point.
They brought the Metro back, and then
Yeah.
next will be these, according to what she said.
Well, that's outstanding. I'm glad to hear
Is that
that.
gonna make the Chinese ones more expensive than what it
I assume so, because there's not that many of them out there.
Stop.
All you gotta do is
Stop off at Walmart on your way.
Well, I gotta make an order when I get home up there, order.
you gotta, all you gotta do is wait 20 years.
I don't think so.
That's one of those toothpicks.
Yeah.
Well, it's about 10 minutes too, so that's about the conclusion here. Does anybody have any questions before you leave?